Hey guys, here I am with part 2 of your 7.2 Enlightenment PowerPoint. If you have not watched the first video, then go back and do that before you join us for this slide deck. For those of you guys that are in the right place, we were just finishing up looking at this graphic and moving on to the next question. Q3, John Locke, write it down, highlight it yellow. All right, so John Locke, one of the most famous philosophers, thinkers, movers, and shakers that came out of this Enlightenment period. He is English born, okay, born in England in the 1630s. He ultimately, over the course of his life, will publish several books about government. And he is very famous, especially in the United States, for some things that he believes in, that he spreads and makes popular, that we value as Americans. This is all stuff that we're talking about right now in this whole PowerPoint, guys. 8th grade, 8th grade, 8th grade. It's going to come up all of the time. It's going to come up in high school. It'll come up in college. And as a good American, you should just know, okay? So John Locke, he's the guy that comes up with the idea of individual rights, okay? You, living in the United States, we have the U.S. Constitution. We have a Bill of Rights. It has several amendments on it, 27, but the first 10 are known as the Bill of Rights, the first 10, and they're all individual rights for you guys. The right to freedom of religion, the right to own a gun, the right to, have an attorney and know why you are getting accused of something if you're going to be put in jail, and on and on and on, the freedom of speech and all these things. Those ideas come from John Locke, the idea of rights for the individual person. It's always up till the 1600s in Europe been the government has rights. The people, not so much. You guys don't matter. The government and the church were the ones with all the power. And here comes John Locke in the 1600s and he says, nay, nay! The average person, the individual, should have rights too. It shouldn't just be government with rights or just church with rights. It should be the average common man, in the country. And so his ideas about individuals having rights greatly impacted the writing of the Declaration of Independence when we fight England to try to win our 13 colonies independence and become the United States of America. All stuff you guys will learn about in 8th grade social studies, okay? So the D of I, as I call it, Declaration of Independence, was greatly influenced by John Locke. Thomas Jefferson, who's the head author of the Declaration of Independence, quotes John Locke many times. Now, this happens, 100 years later, guys. So John Locke's dead by the time we are formulating the Declaration of Independence and trying to become independent. But even though John Locke's dead and it's over 100 years later, his words are still powerful and practiced by the people who think individual rights should definitely be a thing. All right, draw a line underneath everything you just wrote all the way across your page. And here we go, Q4. So some other things John Locke believed. He disagreed with the idea of a dictatorship. He did not think that one person solely by themselves having all of the power was in anyone's best interest. Because unfortunately, too often, a dictator would let power go to their head, and you have many, many corrupt dictators throughout history in all corners of the planet, okay? And so he disagreed with that form of government. He wanted something where the people had more of a say, had more power than just the dictator having all the power. Sound familiar? Something we practice in the US, right? He believed that if a ruler of any kind, whether you're a dictator or a monarch or you were on a panel or whatever the case may be, if whoever was in charge of the country was unjust, meaning they were unfair or corrupt or, only out to help themselves and their friends, if they were lazy in their position and never helping the people or doing their job, if for any reason, like, they should be fired, okay, then in John Locke's opinion, you should be able to fire them, right? If you're not doing your job, just because you're a ruler doesn't mean you're safe from possibly losing your job. You should be able to be forced from power. The people should have the right to revolt and demand change. Something, again, you guys, with the United States, right? We were 13 colonies, and we felt like England was not treating us fairly, that King George III, who was the king at the time, was treating us in a, tyranny type of way. He was corrupt and not being fair to us. And so in the Declaration, when we say, hey, we're going to fight for our right to be independent, we argue the reason why we have the right to want to break away and become the United States is because King George III, you ain't doing your job, buddy. You're being corrupt and unfair to us. Okay, so that idea comes from John Locke. Also, John Locke's the one that kind of makes famous the idea that government only has as much power as the people give it. Think about it, okay? Whoever's the president at the time, whoever the monarch is at the time, whoever's in charge of government, if everyone in the country collectively decided we're not going to follow those people anymore, those people in essence wouldn't have any power, okay? The title of president alone in the United States is not what gives somebody power, okay? The willingness of the people to follow that person is what gives them power. Anything like in life is like that, you guys. 20 bucks is worth 20 bucks because we've all collectively agreed that a $20 bill has $20 worth of value. If you took your $20 bill and you went and visited Mars and there was aliens on Mars, they're going to look at your 20 bucks and be like, this is a useless piece of paper. It means nothing to them, right? So it's all relative. It's how much power you're willing to give something. So John Locke was a big believer in the right for somebody to govern comes from the people. The people have to be willing and wanting to follow that person, okay? So if it's a dictatorship and they just take control and none of the people ever had a say in who that person was, and they don't want to follow that person, according to John Locke, they should have the right to revolt and force that person out. Okay, sound familiar? Again, the United States does this. We kick England to the curb. We fight for it in the Revolutionary War and say we want to be our own country because we don't like your government. Okay, all right, so highlight, 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 draw a line underneath everything you just wrote all the way across your page. The number one belief by John Locke that he's most famous for, and you guys have all probably heard this at some point already in your lives, is the idea of natural rights. If natural rights doesn't ring a bell, this probably will. The right to life, liberty, and property. It was on that graphic, remember? That idea comes out of the Enlightenment. So I already spent quite a while talking about life, liberty, and property because it was on the graphic a couple slides ago. That was John Locke's idea. Okay, by nature, that's why he called them natural rights. Like it's just God-given that obviously you should have the right to life. You should have the right to liberty. And what does that mean again? Freedom. Yeah, liberty means freedom. Okay, and you should have the right to property. It just is an obvious given. That's why he calls them natural rights. So again, I say to you, Thomas Jefferson borrows a lot of these ideas from John Locke while he's writing the Declaration of Independence. Again, I say to you, something you will cover heavily in 8th grade. So burn this stuff into your brain, you guys. Keep it in there over summer vacation and try to remember some of this. It will help you next year for sure, for sure. Okay, so John Locke gives us, okay, you can be forced from power if you're an unjust ruler. The right to rule comes from the people, right? Okay, and he gives us natural rights. Natural rights, what are they, guys? Life, liberty, property. What are natural rights? Life, liberty, property. Life, liberty, property are what? Natural rights, okay? So remember that. They come from John Locke. All right, so draw a line, draw a line, draw a line all the way across your page. And here we go to the next slide. All right, but John Locke, of course, is not the only philosopher to come out of Western Europe during the Enlightenment. There are several others. We're not going to talk about them all, but we're going to talk about a few more. Another really famous one that will come up again in 8th grade and will come up again in high school and will come up again in college, and as an educated American, you should just know, is Montesquieu. What's his name again? Montesquieu. Okay, so Montesquieu, he's from France. Okay. And he believed as well, like John Locke, for rights in the individual. By the time Montesquieu comes around, John Locke is in old age and dead, okay? So Montesquieu comes around a few decades after John Locke was born. And so he's been exposed to John Locke's ideas about natural rights and rights for individual people. Okay. And Montesquieu does a lot of philosophy and thought about how government should work, the government's role in a person's life. All right. He has a really famous quote where he said, power should be a check to power, which means there should be some sort of system in government that is checks and balances. You shouldn't just blindly give all the power to somebody and accept that they have it and accept whatever they say as gospel and it must be correct. He said, no, no, no. Whenever you have a power system, there should be checks in that power system to check for corruption, to check people are doing their job, to check to make sure nobody's getting too powerful, and that will create balance in government, checks and balances. Okay, so that's Montesquieu. Draw a line underneath everything you just wrote all the way across your page. Push pause if you need more time, because here we go. So besides feeling like there should be checks and balances, that power should have more equality in it, he comes up with a way to go about doing that. No one person should ever be too powerful. That's not a good thing. That's where corruption and tyranny occurs, right? And so Montesquieu's the guy who comes up with dividing power out into branches or pieces. Okay, in the United States, this should be familiar to you. We have 3 branches of government. We're spreading the power out in America. We don't want any one person getting too powerful. That idea comes from Montesquieu. Okay, so Montesquieu comes up with the idea of 3 branches. He has the legislative branch, which are the people that create laws. We have this in the United States. We call it Congress. They have it in England. They call it Parliament. Okay, so Congress in the US is our legislative branch. They make laws. We have the judicial branch. The judicial branch interprets the laws. That's the court system, deciding if someone broke a law or not, or if a law is legal or unconstitutional for any reason. So in the United States, that would be the federal Supreme Court, and any other federal courts that we have in the country are all part of the judicial branch. And then we also have that 3rd branch, one of the most often famous branches in different countries that use this system, is the executive branch. That's whoever the president and his cabinet are. So you've got the president, and his cabinet is not something in their wall they can open doors on and, you know, grab a box of cereal. A cabinet is a group of people that advise him. Think about the president's cabinet as advisors. Okay, so in the United States, the president has, I think it's like 16 cabinet members, plus his vice president, plus himself, and then all the people that work for those cabinet members that help the president. So that's the executive branch, and we use that in the United States. Okay, so Montesquieu's the guy that comes up with that idea, separating out powers into different sections, and that way you can have checks and balances, because the legislative branch can keep an eye on the judicial and executive branch, the judicial branch can keep an eye on the legislative and executive branch, and the executive branch can keep an eye on the legislative and judicial branches. They can all watch over each other, making sure power stays balanced by checking in on one another, right? Checks and balances, making sure no one branch or no one person in any branch becomes too powerful, because with too much power, again, can come tyranny, can come corruption, can come problems like with dictatorships, okay? And so Montesquieu's the guy that gives us those 3 branches, something you're gonna heavily cover in 8th grade and high school and college, and you should just kind of know the fundamentals of how government works as a U.S. citizen. So remember, this one's an important one, okay? Draw a line underneath everything you just wrote all the way across your page, okay? It's his idea of the 3 branches that will end up influencing the U.S. Constitution, something I've kind of shared with you already, right? We get that idea of 3 branches of government, separating the powers out, having a check and balance system to help prevent corruption from Montesquieu. So we get that idea a couple hundred years later from, you know, the Enlightenment philosophers, all right? We have some additional philosophers I'm going to cover quickly in our 3rd segment, which won't take the whole time, and then you guys will be done. So I'll see you for segment 3 when you're ready to watch that. Hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you then.